In the misty mountains of southern Japan, during the winter of 1877, gunfire echoed through ancient forests as two worlds collided in battle. On one side stood the gleaming new Imperial Army of Japan, armed with modern rifles and cannon, dressed in Western-style uniforms. On the other stood the last samurai warriors of an age rapidly vanishing, men who had once been the most feared fighters in Asia, but now faced extinction. This was the Satsumi Rebellion, the final stand of Japan's legendary warrior class against the unstoppable tide of modernization. This is the story of how a proud warrior culture made its last desperate attempt to preserve a way of life that had defined Japan for nearly 1,000 years. To understand the Satsumi Rebellion, we must first travel back to 1868, when Japan was transformed by an event known as the Meiji Restoration. For over 250 years, Japan had been ruled by the Tokugawa shogunate, a military government led by a supreme warlord called the shogun. The emperor existed but held no real power, serving only as a figurehead and spiritual symbol. Under shogun rule, Japan had closed itself off from the outside world. Few foreigners were allowed to enter, and Japanese were forbidden to leave. This isolationist policy, called sakoku, kept Japan mostly frozen in time while the rest of the world raced forward with new technologies and ideas. Everything changed in 1853 when American warships commanded by Commodore Matthew Perry arrived in Edo Bay, modern Tokyo. These massive black ships, with their powerful cannon, demonstrated to the shocked Japanese just how far behind they had fallen. The shogun, unable to resist such overwhelming firepower, was forced to sign treaties opening Japan to foreign trade. This humiliation sparked a civil war. Young samurai, particularly from the powerful southern domains of Satsuma and Choshu, rallied around the Emperor Meiji and his call to revere the emperor, expel the barbarians. In 1868, after a series of battles, they overthrew the shogun and restored direct imperial rule for the first time in centuries. A Satsuma samurai who fought in these battles later recalled, "We believed we were fighting to drive out foreign influence and restore our ancient traditions. How ironic that our victory would instead open the floodgates to the very changes we feared." Once in power, the young Emperor Meiji and his advisors realized something profound. To avoid being colonized by Western powers like China and India had been, Japan would need to rapidly modernize. Their slogan became, "Rich country, strong army," and they launched an astonishing series of reforms. In just a few years, Japan began building railroads, telegraph lines, factories, and shipyards. Young Japanese were sent abroad to study Western science, medicine, law, and military tactics. Foreign experts were hired to help build modern institutions. Most importantly, the government created a new national army based on the European model, with conscription, standardized training, and the latest weapons. Most radical of all were the changes affecting the samurai class. For centuries, these warriors had stood at the top of Japanese society with special privileges, including the right to carry two swords and to execute commoners who showed disrespect. Now the government abolished their stipends, ended their legal status, and finally, in 1876, prohibited them from wearing swords in public. "The sword is the soul of the samurai," wrote a shocked warrior from Satsuma. "To forbid us our swords is to rob us not merely of our status, but of our very identity." No one felt these changes more deeply than Saigo Takamori, the most famous samurai in Japan. A giant of a man standing over 6 feet tall, extremely rare for Japanese of that era. Saigo had helped lead the revolution that restored the emperor. As a reward, he received a high position in the new government. But Saigo was a complex man, torn between loyalty to the emperor and devotion to samurai values. Born in Kagoshima, the capital of Satsuma Domain, today's Kagoshima Prefecture, he believed in Bushido, the samurai code emphasizing honor, loyalty, and martial arts mastery. As the government increasingly embraced westernization, Saigo found himself opposing many new policies. In 1873, a crucial disagreement erupted. Saigo wanted to lead an invasion of Korea to avenge a diplomatic insult, believing this would give the samurai a worthy cause and maintain their martial skills. But the government, concerned about Western reaction and unwilling to risk their modernization plans, rejected this proposal. Furious, Saigo resigned from the government and returned to his home in Kagoshima. There, he established private military academies called Shigako, where thousands of unemployed samurai gathered to study traditional martial arts and modern military science. They practiced sword fighting and marksmanship, maintaining their warrior skills even as the government tried to turn them into bureaucrats and merchants. "Better to die a samurai than live as a merchant," was a common saying among Saigo's followers. "The way of the warrior is found in death," taught another old samurai maxim. By 1877, tensions had reached a breaking point. The government, growing suspicious of Saigo's academies, sent a warship to Kagoshima to confiscate weapons from the local arsenal. This provoked outrage among the samurai, who believed the central government was preparing to attack them. On January 29, 1877, several hundred samurai raided the naval yards at Kagoshima and seized weapons and ammunition. Government officials fled, reporting to Tokyo that Saigo was planning a rebellion. Though Saigo himself had not ordered the raid and was initially reluctant to oppose the emperor he had helped restore, the die was cast. A force of around 40,000 samurai gathered around Saigo, ready to march. Most were armed with traditional swords, though many also carried firearms. Some wore modern military uniforms, while others dressed in traditional samurai attire. All knew they were likely marching to their deaths. One of Saigo's lieutenants, Kirino Toshiaki, spoke to the assembled warriors. "The government has betrayed the revolution we fought for. They discard our traditions and adopt foreign ways. If we must die to defend the soul of Japan, so be it. Better to die as warriors than live as servants of foreign ideas." Saigo decided to march on Tokyo. Perhaps he hoped to trigger uprisings in other parts of Japan, or maybe he simply sought an honorable death in battle rather than slow extinction. Either way, on February 15, 1877, he led his army north toward the government garrison at Kumamoto Castle. Kumamoto Castle was one of Japan's mightiest fortresses, now held by a garrison of 3,800 government troops commanded by Colonel Tani Tateki. Though outnumbered, these imperial soldiers had modern weapons and were protected by massive stone walls. On February 19th, the samurai army surrounded the castle and demanded its surrender. When this was refused, they launched a series of fierce attacks, using ladders to scale the walls while their sharpshooters picked off defenders. The fighting was brutal and bloody, with the samurai displaying incredible courage as they charged into withering gunfire. "They came straight at us, swords drawn, even as our Gatling guns cut down whole rows of men," wrote an imperial soldier afterward. "I had been told the age of samurai was over, but no one told these warriors who died by the dozens yet kept coming." For 3 days, the attacks continued. The samurai captured the outer defenses and set fire to many castle buildings, but could not take the inner citadel. Meanwhile, the imperial army was rushing reinforcements to the region. Saigo decided to pull back and establish defensive positions in the surrounding hills to await the government counterattack. The imperial government mobilized quickly, eventually assembling a force of 300,000 soldiers against Saigo's dwindling army. Modern warships blockaded Kagoshima while troops poured into Kyushu from all directions. Realizing he could no longer hope to reach Tokyo, Saigo retreated into the mountainous interior of Kyushu, where the difficult terrain would negate some of the imperial army's advantages. What followed was a brutal 7-month campaign of guerrilla warfare, sieges, and pitched battles. The Battle of Tabaruzaka became one of the bloodiest engagements. For 3 weeks in March, samurai forces held a narrow mountain pass against repeated imperial assaults. Fighting occurred day and night, with casualties mounting on both sides. The samurai used their knowledge of the terrain to launch surprise attacks, while the government forces relied on superior firepower and numbers. "The mountains ran with blood," wrote a journalist who visited the battlefield afterward. "Every tree was scarred by bullets, every rock stained red. The bodies of the dead lay so thick in places that one could walk across the pass stepping only on corpses." Eventually, numbers and modern weapons prevailed. The samurai were forced to retreat again, leaving behind thousands of dead. Similar scenes played out across Kyushu as Saigo's forces were gradually pushed back toward their home territory of Kagoshima. By August 1877, Saigo's once proud army had been reduced to about 3,000 warriors. Ammunition was running low, food was scarce, and many were wounded. Yet they fought on, loyal to their leader and their cause until the end. The imperial forces, now commanded by General Yamagata Aritomo, ironically a former samurai himself, pursued them relentlessly. Artillery bombarded samurai positions while infantry conducted coordinated assaults with bayonet-tipped rifles. The government had also deployed new weapons including Gatling guns, early machine guns that could fire hundreds of rounds per minute. A decisive engagement occurred at the Battle of Shiroyama, a small mountain overlooking Kagoshima Bay. Here, on September 24, 1877, the last 500 samurai made their final stand. They were surrounded by 30,000 imperial troops who had placed artillery on nearby heights. Through the night, government artillery pounded the samurai positions, preventing sleep and causing casualties. At dawn, with their ammunition nearly exhausted, the remaining warriors prepared for their last fight. Saigo, wounded and exhausted but unbowed, addressed his men. "We have done our duty. History will judge whether we were right or wrong. Now let us show them how samurai die." As the morning mist cleared on September 25th, imperial troops began their final assault up the slopes of Shiroyama. The remaining samurai, many without ammunition, drew their swords and prepared to meet them. What followed was both heroic and tragic. Wave after wave of imperial troops advanced up the hill, and the samurai charged down to meet them. Gunfire tore through samurai ranks, but still they came on, swords flashing in the morning light. According to accounts from imperial soldiers, the samurai fought with supernatural courage. Some continued fighting even after suffering multiple gunshot wounds. Others performed seppuku, ritual suicide, rather than surrender. By midday, only a handful remained around Saigo himself. The exact circumstances of Saigo's death remain somewhat mysterious. The most widely accepted account is that, severely wounded, he asked his loyal follower Beppu Shinsuke to assist him in performing seppuku, the warrior's ritual suicide. After Saigo had stabbed himself, Beppu, as required by the ritual, beheaded his master to ensure a quick death. Beppu and the last defenders then charged the imperial lines with drawn swords and were cut down by rifle fire. When imperial troops reached Saigo's body, many reportedly wept at the sight of the fallen hero. Though their enemy, he had been admired throughout Japan, even by those who opposed him. General Yamagata ordered that his remains be treated with respect. By early afternoon, the fighting was over. The Satsumi Rebellion, the last stand of the samurai, had ended. The cost of the rebellion was enormous. Over 6,000 samurai dead, along with about 6,000 imperial troops and countless civilian casualties. Kagoshima lay in ruins, much of it destroyed by naval bombardment and ground fighting. For Japan, the rebellion marked the final transition from feudal state to modern nation. The government had proven it could defeat even the mighty samurai of Satsuma, long considered Japan's finest warriors. The National Army had shown its effectiveness, and the modernization program continued at an even faster pace. Yet Saigo was not forgotten. Just 12 years after the rebellion, the government officially pardoned him and, in an extraordinary reversal, declared him a national hero. A great bronze statue of Saigo and his dog was erected in Tokyo's Ueno Park, where it stands today. Far from being condemned as a traitor, he has been remembered as a man of principle who fought for what he believed in, even against impossible odds. The samurai themselves faded into history. Their legal privileges were gone forever, their swords became museum pieces, and their code of Bushido was transformed into a more general set of ethical principles for all Japanese. Yet something of the samurai spirit survived and continued to influence Japanese culture and identity. During Japan's modernization and military expansion in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, the courage, loyalty, and self-sacrifice of the samurai were held up as virtues for all citizens. Perhaps most lasting is the concept of noble failure that Saigo represents, the idea that fighting for a doomed but worthy cause can be more honorable than pragmatic surrender to inevitable change. This idea remains powerful in Japan and resonates with people worldwide who face moral dilemmas in times of rapid change. As a famous Japanese poem about the rebellion concludes, "The cherry blossoms of Kagoshima fell too soon in the mountain wind, yet their fragrance lingers still in the memory of men who value honor above life itself." The age of samurai had ended, but their legend was just